the current model of reality that has more in common with solipsism than idealism, than non-duality, because the implication is it's actually everything we experience is taking place in our brain, in our mind. So can you just explain that in the simplest terms possible?
Under materialism, the qualities of your perceptual experiences, all the colors you see, the sounds you hear, the smells you taste, the textures you touch and feel, all these qualities are generated by your brain inside your skull. If you look up to the sky at night and you see a bright star, say Sirius, that quality, that star you see, that thing you perceive, all those qualities, all of that perception is happening inside your skull. So your real skull under materialism is above the stars as you see them. Now, materialism would say there are real stars out there, but they are not what you see. They have no qualities. They are pure abstraction. You cannot visualize them because if you visualize it, you're already bringing qualities into the picture. And under materialism, qualities are created by your brain inside your head. So, under materialism, the world of your experiences is entirely within your real head.
Bernardo, can
And
I
of
just
course,
ask, just quickly, when could you just elaborate a tiny bit on qualities, what you mean by that?
qualities is colors are qualities, melodies are qualities, flavors are qualities. The world as it is in itself under materialism has no qualities. It has no colors, has no tastes, has no smells. It has matter. And what is matter? It's something entirely defined in terms of quantities, of numbers. It's an abstraction. You cannot visualize it. But theoretically, if you provide a long enough list with the relevant numbers, you will have said everything there is to be said about matter as defined under materialism. It has no qualities. Under materialism, all qualities are somehow, nobody has any clue how, not even in principle, somehow generated by your brain inside your head.
Can I ask you
Um,
a question, Bernardo?
yeah,
Yeah,
sure.
I'm asking you a question. I know it's not what you believe, but if I were asking a materialist, someone that has this view that you've just given, that all of them, that the world really exists inside our head. So what about the head itself? Surely, if the world exists inside the brain, inside the head, then the brain and the head must exist in. The
Yeah,
argument falls apart there.
a materialist would say the head you see in the mirror is not your head. It's an internal representation of your real head created by your brain.
And what about the brain then?
The brain you see if you crack my skull open is not my real brain. It's an internal representation of my real brain created by your brain inside your real skull. The real brain, the real skull under materialism have no qualities. They have no color, no qualities whatsoever. They are pure abstraction. They are defined in terms of a list of numbers and mathematical relationships between these numbers, like spatial temporal position, mass, charge, spin, momentum, frequency, amplitude, and all that. So most casual materialists don't know this. Because if they knew, they would say, this is absolute nonsense. I mean, I'm replacing reality with an abstraction, which happens to also not work because there is no coherent and explicit way to tell how quantities can generate qualities. It's an absurdity, it's an inversion of reasoning, so to say.
Um,
Um, yeah.
Look, you've tied me in knots, which is a good sign, which shows, I think, that it doesn't um, seem to be particularly uh, hold much strength or water, whatever you want to say. Rupert, can you just then? I've heard you dismantle it in very simple terms, the material model. So I'm going to challenge you to do that again. And I know that you're not going to be pulling something from memory, but I've seen you do it in a couple of sentences before, and really starkly paint how absurd it can be. So I'm going to challenge you to try and do that again if you could.
Not sure I'll manage 2 sentences, Simon, but I'll do my best. The only thing we can be certain of is the knowing of experience. And in fact, not even the knowing of experience, as if the knowing of it were one thing and experience itself were something other than knowing. All we can be certain of is knowing. That's the only absolute certainty. I'm using knowing synonymous with consciousness, but I use the word knowing to try and bring it close to our experience. There is the knowing of the sound of my voice, the knowing of the sight of your screen, the knowing of the temperature of the air on your face, the knowing of whatever emotion you may be experiencing. There's just the knowing of experience. Knowing is the only substance that is ever known or experienced. So anything that we posit outside of knowing is an abstraction, a mental abstraction that can never be verified. Because if we were to come in contact with it, all that we would know of it is the knowing of it. So knowing is the only certainty. It's the only thing, which is of course not a thing, that has ever been experienced or could ever be experienced by anybody. I'm implying that knowing is known by a person. I don't mean that. Knowing is that which knows. So this knowing is known by itself. That's all we can be sure of. So if we want to build a model of reality that is anything other than, or could ever be anything other than, a mental abstraction, unrelated to our experience, why don't we start with what we know, with what we have in our hands, knowing, consciousness, and only resort to something outside of that if our current experience cannot be satisfactorily explained using only consciousness, which it can. Not only can our current experience be explained very satisfactorily, referring only to knowing or consciousness, there are so many aspects of our current experience that cannot be satisfactorily explained under the prevailing materialist paradigm. So I could elaborate. I think that's
yes. The best known of which, of course, is the hard problem of consciousness. And I believe it was David Chalmers, who I believe also Bernardo, who came up with that. So could you just give a quick, brief explanation of actually what that is in simple terms and why it's not just a hard problem, it's a completely unsolvable problem under the current paradigm?
Dave framed the problem as follows. There is nothing about physical parameters in terms of which we could deduce, even in principle, the qualities of experience. In other words, the gap between the qualities that are nature's given, our experiences, our qualitative experience, that's pre-theoretical. It's what is given to us. It's how the whole thing starts. There is nothing about what we call physical parameters in terms of which we could deduce experience. So whatever brain arrangement you come up with, whatever pattern of brain activity you come up with, it may corresponds to the quality of warmth or to the quality of coldness. There is nothing in terms of those nothing about those physical parameters in terms of which we could deduce this is a hot experience or this is the experience of coldness. It's a completely arbitrary gap between the two. And Dave formulated this very precisely in 94. He puts himself down. He says, well, no, I didn't do anything. People already knew that. I just chose certain words. But of course, framing the problem is halfway to the solution. And the solution in this case is to take a couple of steps back because we took a wrong turn at some point. We need to retrace our steps back and try a different understanding of what's going on, because what the hard problem shows is that there is an internal contradiction in the materialist way of thinking. And there is no way to solve that in the sense that we can continue in the materialist path and account for experience in terms of quantities that's incoherent already in principle, let alone in practice, we have to trace our steps back and try a different road.